Hi you guys, I know it's been a minute since I've done a video and just been going through some stuff, growing pains, but I'm super excited to share today, which is what about your friends part the I've been thinking about this message and like, what about your friends, Leah or Jonathan? Leah's story comes in with Rachel, and Rachel was one of those women who were bitterly wanting to have children and wishing that she had, and she had a sister wife who she felt, literally a sister wife, who she felt was, kind of picking at her, or she felt less than a woman because she wasn't able to have kids with her husband. I have a bone to pick with Leah. To me, being a sister is like a day one friend. Um, it depends, I guess, on the dynamics of the relationship and the household and how you guys grew up. I'm not sure if they had the same mother or not, but they definitely had the same father. We'll get into that in a minute. But I felt like even like as a sister, taboo, honey, just kissing cousins and sister sharing. That's nasty. And then on top of that, babes, like Leah could have told Rachel that their father was planning to mollywop and wife swap, okay? Like they could have told, she could have said something. Let me get to the nitty gritty of the story. Background: Leah. She is the sister of Rachel. Rachel and Leah are daughters of Laban. Laban is the brother of Rebecca, who is Jacob's mother. And Jacob has to flee his family home, and he has to go to Armenia to, I think it's Padar Aram. I may be saying that wrong, but anyways, where his mother is from, because Esau is ready to, put them hands on him. Esau said, when Papa dies, I'm getting you for playing me, baby. You done played me one too many times. Little does Jacob know, this whole thing of trickery and bamboozlement is a family, trait. Laban is ready for him. Laban got something for him. And so he runs away, makes it there, goes to a well. He sees Rachel. She's a shepherdess. She's gorgeous. He cries. He's like, yes, God, yes. And he tells Laban later, hey, I want to marry her. Laban says, sure, you got to work for me for 7 years. So, okay. He did it. And as a matter of fact, when he gets done, he said, hey, I've finished my 7 years. Give me my wife. I want to lie with her. Like, NIV version, baby. And so, Laban like, yeah, I got you. And so Jacob thinks he is consummating a marriage with Rachel. He gets the tenant out of older sister. And Laban said, baby, it ain't our custom for you to marry the first before you, marry the second before the first is, because the first isn't married. So, you gotta marry the first one first. And then after you finish that wedding week with her, you can have another wedding week with Rachel, but you gotta work for me for another 7 years. Where they do that at? I already served my 7. Just because you want to, play word games with me and semantics and all that kind of stuff, you could have missed me. I would have told him, you can kiss it where the sun don't shine, baby. I would have I would have left him and his cockeyed daughter right there at the altar, okay? But, Jacob, he really, really wants Rachel. And I'm sure, after 7 years of looking at this woman, I would have been mad if I was Rachel. Like, how you ain't gonna know me and my gait and my walk and my smell and my tone of voice? And how you ain't gonna know my eyes? Like, well, you not looking at her face? What were you doing? How you ain't gonna know her? How you ain't gonna know that it's not me? How you not knowing? Anywho. Like, I'm sure y'all was out there chasing them sheep together and frolicking in the pastures together. I'm sure you know her pheromones. Like, I am confused as to how you could mistake me for my sister. But I digress because they got married. And after this wedding, it still didn't matter to Jacob. Like, I love who I love. I want who I want. And because of that, God showed favor on Leah. Not on Rachel, but on Leah. And Leah gets to have 4 babies. Boom, boom, boom. Pounding them out. Meanwhile, Rachel is like, woe is me. And she even tells Jacob, hey, get yourself together, give me a child. He said, woman, am I God? Like, that's God's business. Because she feels less of a woman and ridiculed because this man who loves her, and yeah, Leah, you got your nails in them first because of your tomfoolery, but he's mine. And I can't even procreate. I can't even be fruitful and multiply. I can't even fulfill my purpose because here you go blocking it. Here you go, here you are with my man. Here you are salty that he loves me, and so you trying to have every kind of child that you can, get knocked up whenever you can, just to show proof that I don't know. Because the sad part is Jacob still didn't love her more. You know, he was just doing what he had to do. And that's why she had favor. And so there's this situation where, like, I get both were bitter Bettys. A little bit of me felt sorry for Leah in that she loved a man who didn't love her back, who wouldn't reciprocate. So I did feel sorry for her, and I'm like, yeah, Rachel could have been a little bit more tender, kinder, and could have been like, hey, I see what you're going through and I'm sorry. However, both of them were missing the blessings and the favor that they had on their lives, where Rachel had the love and favor of being Jacob's favorite. Leah had the love of being God's favorite. And if you kind of look at it in terms of like childbirth, she was able to birth out 4 boys. That's like gold back in those days. And then even one of her sons were an ancestor to Jesus. So the line of Jesus, came from Leah. But she, instead of basking in, okay, I don't have the love of this man, but I have the love of my children, she still was competing with her sister. So they, their toxicity gets their maids involved in it, their servants, and they go give their servants to their husband, sleep with him. Human trafficking, child. And he does. And first it was Rachel who was like, okay, I can't have no kids, you can have a kid by my servant. And then Leah was like, oh, your servant having a baby? Well, my servant gonna have a baby. She gonna have 2 of them, matter of fact. Like, and I'm just like, seriously, I have several seeds. Y'all sit up here fighting with other people's bodies. Competition, jealousy, rivalry, all of that is just being cultivated in this frenemy stance. And what really sparked this comparison between Leah and Jonathan, I had already had a soft spot for Jonathan after I read Samuel and how he stood up for David. But Leah, I could feel sorry for her because back in those days, women didn't have much say. I'm sure she just did what her father told her to do. I still feel like she could have gave them a heads up. I still feel not as if that would have changed anything. But what really burnt my little southern biscuits was when Honey Child Lamb Chops told her, if you want some of these mandrakes that my son got me, who they believe was a root to increase fertility, you want some of these mandrakes, you got to give me time with your husband. The time that's allotted to you to spend with your husband so y'all could be fruitful and multiply, I want that. Like, not only did you steal me out of my first wife title, now you want time with him too. Now you want block the little bit of time that I do get with. I already got to share them with you. We already got tricked into that mess. Now you ain't even gonna be like, fam, I got 4 kids, I'm good. And then my maid had a couple more. We good. Here, you can have. She didn't even say give all of them to me. She said share. You could have gave her a few of them. You didn't have to take her night with her husband too. And poor Rachel, she's so thirsty to have a child. She was like, yeah. And it still didn't yield what she wanted quickly. And it's like, and the whole time I was reading it, I was like, God is saying, don't compare your blessings to other people. Don't compare your timing to other people's. Don't compare your favor with other people, because I reign how I want to reign. And what's for you will always be for you. I will hold that ram in a bush if it's meant to be yours, which eventually it was meant to be hers. She did have a baby. She had Joseph, which means God will increase, and that he did. Everybody knows the story of Joseph and his many colors, and what we don't see the backstory is the bitterness that's between Rachel and Leah. Actually trickles to, or I guess you do see it, but it trickles down to their kids, where like their own kids was just like didn't even like Joseph. Poor Joseph. This rivalry, this competition ends up filtering into the next generation, into the sons, and they end up, again, the spirit of deceitfulness from Laban goes down to Leah, and then it goes down to their kids, where they deceive Jacob and saying that Joseph has died, and they sell him into slavery. And Leah means weary. Leah means tired. Does your friendship cause you to be weary or tired? Is your friendship like a frenemy situation, where you're in competition with each other, where you're always comparing each other to life's goals, where you're always feeling like I have to measure up, or she won't see me in a certain light, or he won't see me in a certain light? Let's talk about David's best friend. People, let me tell you about my best friend. Okay, I'm goofy and corny, but so Jonathan means God's God gave it, or God give it, and literally I trust, in other words, God's gift, God's given. That's what it means. So he was a God-given friend. How about that? Like, Jonathan was introduced in 1 Samuel chapter 18, and like the first few verses, it talks about how he recognizes David as his soul counterpart. Like, he recognized himself in David, and it makes sense because David was a fighter. He was a soldier. He had fought Goliath, I believe, by this point, and he also was a fighter as far as lions and tigers and bears in the pastures. Oh my. He would fight them to protect his sheep. And I'm sure as the younger brother, he had to do a lot of fighting with his older brothers. So they were both fighters, and I think Jonathan recognized that fighting spirit that David had to have to survive. To survive Saul, child. And who knows, Jonathan probably had this. Jonathan did have to have it to survive his daddy, because in the end, his love for his friend cost him the relationship with his father. So it's stated that Jonathan, not only did he recognize him as his soul counterpart, he entered into a covenant with him, and then he covers David with his robe and gives him his things. And that's just like, hey, I see you as family now. You're a part of my family. You're part of me, and I'm gonna rock with you till the wheels turn off. Like, and he does. Till the wheels fall off, I meant to say. And he does. In 1 Samuel 19, 1-7, you find David at a place where he's realizing Saul wants him dead. And he's like, yo, daddy, he coming for me. He cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. There would be times where David was sitting there playing music and that's when David was first. That's one of the things David did when he first came to Saul's kingdom, was play music for him, because when David was anointed, Saul, the Spirit of God left Saul and went to David, and that allowed for a bad spirit to come. I call it cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because this dude don't know if he coming or going. He don't. One moment oh, David is awesome, and the next moment he's like, kill him. Remind me of a Game of Thrones scene. But my point is, y'all, she's goofy. My point is that Jonathan finds out that he's like, David, what's going on? Why aren't you coming around, and David is kind of, he's questioning his friendship. He was like, your dad wants to kill me, and don't lie to me and say that he doesn't, because I know that he does. I know that you're his son, so I understand if you're going to take his side. And Jonathan's like, no, no, no. I'm gonna go talk to my dad and let him know you good people, you cool people. Like, what you mad at your servant for? He out here making you look good, He out here. But Saul was jealous. They were singing songs about David, about how he killed 10,000 and Saul only killed one. And every time he put him out to war and was hoping he was gonna die, David came back victorious. He did things like he was playing music for him at the table, and he just got mad and threw a spear at David. And David, Nook, if you buck, he bucked. Now let me tell you, David better than me, because I would have grabbed that spear and threw it back. But David got a good heart. He good people, fam. Like Jonathan said, what you coming for him for? Leave him alone. And then David was like, Saul was like, you right, son. David is good people. He has been making me look good. But then when he would see him again, he would just get mad, because it reminded him of what he had lost. It reminded him of the favor he had lost, and he knew. Like Samuel told him back in the day, he was like, hey, you moved too quick. You moved without God. Now you've lost the favor of God. Your sons would have been kings forever, but now that you've done this without me, you've lost. Now someone else is going to reign over your kingdom. And he goes off and he goes and anoints David. And Saul knows this, like, internally. He didn't know who was going to replace him, but eventually, seeing how much favor is on David, he's like, he got what I had. So he knew, he was like, this person, he coming for me. And I remember in 1 Samuel 20, the whole chapter talks about this celebration of the new moon and how David was supposed to be there, but he knows Saul is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and if he sees him, he's gonna come for his throat again, and he ain't going. And Jonathan was like, hey, I'm gonna go for you, and I'll tell my dad I agree for you to go somewhere else. And if he gets irate and tries to throw stuff at me, then I'll know you're right, and I'll come back and give you a signal with like 3 arrows. And where I tell my servant to go pick it up, how I tell him to pick it up, is how you'll know whether or not my daddy is still cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, babes. So Jonathan goes to this festival, and about the second night of the festival, Saul realizes that David is not there, and Saul real salty about David. He was like, where this dude at? Where Jesse's son at? He, it's like they say on Harry Potter, he who must not be named. Like, you ever been so angry with someone, like you just can't stand them, you can't even say their name, it makes you tick. That's how Saul was. Where is Jesse's son? He ain't even calling his name. And Jonathan's like, oh, I let him go somewhere. Saul goes crazy. He throws the spear at his first son and tries to kill him. I know you on that dude's team, and I know that you have his back. And he was like, don't you know that your kingdom will not exist if he exists? And Jonathan's like, I ain't done all that, fam. Like, I ain't jealous, I don't care. And that's a friend. That's a God-given friend, where what's for me is for me, and what's for you is for you. And whether for you causes you to shine and look better for me, I'm going to support you in that. That's a friendship. That's another reason why I rocks with Jonathan. Like, not only did he stand up to his crazy daddy, it's one thing for someone to stand up for you when they have a camaraderie with another person, that person who doesn't like you. But when someone stands up for you when it could be bad for them, like lose your life, like get out my family, someone who's so irate and Saul had gotten to the point where you couldn't even talk to him respectfully. Like, there was a point where David could have killed him in a cave while he was, doing them 1, number 2, I don't know. But he could have died, and David just cut off a piece of his robe, and David had his men with him, so, they could have, gave him the business. Him and his men, like, caught him off guard and everything. He gets out this cave, and David follows him and say, "Hey, leave me alone. I could have killed your fam. I got a piece of your robe right here. I could have fed you. I could have gave you these hands. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't have seen it coming. You're in a dark cave. You wouldn't have known it was me." But God said, "Don't touch my anointed." And I'm like, dang, that's why David had the favor of God. He was like even obeying God when it came to like danger. Like Saul could have killed him, and Saul was like, huh, David ain't so bad. He could have killed me. I'm gonna go back to my kingdom and to my throne and chill for a bit. But it was like the very next verse or so, he completely forgot that this man was still honoring him. And it was like misplaced anger, because instead of him being angry at God and really truly angry with himself is who he should have been angry with, he was angry with David. He could have been like, hey, I'm gonna step down. I messed up, God. Who knows? He could have repented, and maybe God would have let him live out his life with some good land over there. David a nice person. He would have let him have some land over the maybe south of Judah or something. I don't know. But instead, he wants to choose the crazy, right? Instead, he wants to be a devil. And he loses his life horribly so. And he causes a generational curse not only on himself but on his kids and on his kids. Like all of his male descendants, they were looking for him. They was out to murder. It was like murder, kill. No more Saul's descendants. We want no more crazy. No more. And they did. They killed all except for one. And the one that they decided not to kill was the one who was lame in both feet. He was dropped, and somehow dropping a child caused club feet. But his name was and God forgive me, I'm finna slaughter it. It was Mephibosheth. I'm gonna call him Clubfoot, Jonathan's son. God forgive me. But Jonathan's son, he was running. His nurse was running with him on the hip, and she dropped him. And then she took him to this region called Lodabar, and he was seen as not a threat by Saul's enemies, to the point where like they forgot he existed. So when Saul died, David steps in. He's I want to say managing, but he's basically getting everything back in order. And once his kingdom is back in order, he sits down with one of the servants of Saul's. Starts with a Z. Ziba, yeah, that's his name. And he says, "Hey, is there any of Saul's descendants left?" Child, I would have been like, "He who must not be named. Does he got any more kids?" I would have said his name either. Now that's a real one you want to say. Like, Saul really was acting like Voldemort. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry. That's my Harry Potter people. Please forgive me for all those super religious people who say you shouldn't watch Harry Potter. But hey, you watch Disney and it's magic fake too. Okay. Anyways, though, Saul did have one descendant that was left, one male descendant that was left, and that was Jonathan's son. I think he was his youngest son. And David tells Zodabar, go get him, bring him, invite him to my home. Because of the relationship that I had with Jonathan, I am going to cause this generational curse to be broken and give him what would have been his if he was still the king's grandson. So, hey, you know what I'm saying? Not only did we break a curse, we're starting a blessing. And even though homeboy was lame in both feet, he had a son. His son was named Micah, which I thought was interesting since his auntie name was Micah as well, but it was like Michal. Anyways, it was pronounced Micah. And then he has a son, and it's Mica. By the way, Micah was the auntie, Jonathan's sister, was married and eventually goes back to David, and she helps him evade Saul by pretending, putting idols in the bed and pretending that David was still there and ill to give him time to put distance between um, Saul's soldiers and himself. So, David really did have God's hand on him, and God used his enemies' kids to even protect him. Um, Michael ends up going crazy like a daddy in the end. That's a whole nother subject. In my opinion, she goes crazy, but she gets mad because he's David. Dance like David dance. She gets a little salty. She gets passed around, unfortunately, as women did back in those days. But she does get a little salty and mad at David when he takes her back and takes over his kingdom. Back to the generational blessing. Jonathan's son, he actually gets granted land. He gets granted his granddad's servant, Zodabar, and he goes off and live, and he gets to commune and eat with David whenever he wants to. David honors Jonathan by honoring Saul's grandson, and even though Saul is an enemy, that doesn't matter to him, and you're hoping that it doesn't matter to Saul's grandson, right? Well, David, the fighter that he is, he has to even fight in his own house. He actually cried when his son Absalom died. His own son decided, we gonna cool this up. We gonna get rid of daddy. He ain't about the right. I can do a better job. So, he went conniving and scheming behind his back, and supposedly Saul's grandson was one of his supporters, according to Zodabar. Zodabar goes and meet David out in the somewhere, child, outside the kingdom, outside the capital, anyways. Like, David flees, he leaves his mistresses, and Absalom is sleeping with David's mistresses and concubines. I'm like, dude, you are nasty. You want to be like your daddy that bad? Like, you gonna sleep with his women too? Oh, shady boots. When David ran away, supposedly Nephi, Jonathan's son, supported the coup instead of supporting David, the one who gave him back his land. And so, of course, David wins, and he comes back, takes over, his throne, and Zodabar was like, yeah, Saul's grandson was saying, if you lose, he gets this inner turmoil between your house and your son. Maybe y'all wipe each other out, and I can get back what my father had lost. Well, David was like, okay, we'll see. Tell him to come to me now. I'm back on my throne. Because of the covenant that David had with Jonathan, he says, I'm going to give you the benefit of doubt. Now, it seems like Zodabar is telling the truth, but I ain't gonna penalize you completely, and I'm not gonna cut your throat like I wanted to. Because of the relationship that I had with your father, I'm gonna give you half of your land back. Now, that's what Jonathan friendships do. That's what God-given friendships do. They break curses. They provide grace. They help you move towards what God has for you. They provide provisioning, covering. They help you build generational blessings. David was able to become king and was able to pass his kingdom on to Solomon, who was even a greater king. So a lot of it was due to Jonathan helping to protect, helping to cover, helping to provide, giving guidance. And that's the whole point of this message. What about your friends? Part 2. Do you have a frenemy, or do you have a friend in me? Is this someone you can count on? Is this someone you can trust? We all need grace, and I'm learning that. One of the reasons why love is so important is because it allows us to forgive And you can love frenemies, especially if you have a Leah and Rachel situation and that's your family. One doesn't go without the other. And you can have friendships that you truly do love a person, but ask yourself, is it making you tired? Is it hindering you? Or is it making your walk with God harder? Or do you have a Jonathan where it's making your walk with God easier? So I end this message just stating that God reigns on the just as well as the unjust. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to support one another, love one another, comfort one another, cover one another, pray for one another, support one another, and just be there for each other. There's no reason why we should see one another as frenemies or, comparing each other goals or walk in life. We shouldn't, because you always have that ram in the bush, and my ram will be different from yours. What I need for my walk with God is different from what you need with your walk with God. We all have our own relationships, and the one thing that I learned from studying this is that Leah and Rachel, baby, learn to love the favor. Find the favor that God has for you, acknowledge it, and learn to live in that and rest assured in it, because you cannot live someone else's life. You cannot have someone else's anointing. You cannot have someone else's favor. It just won't even work with you, for you, like that. So that's the message. Hopefully you guys got something from this, and I'll be back with another What About Your Friends New Testament version. Bye, you guys. Yay! I love this.